Good morning. Female Frodo Baggins here. Yes, there's going to be a fan playing in the background of this video because it is ridiculously hot outside, and today I am prioritizing my personal comfort over sound quality. But anyway, today we are going to have a discussion about Avengers Doomsday because, guys, Fantastic Four has flopped spectacularly. I don't know the budget behind the scenes of the movie on how much it's going to lose or anything like that, but it dropped another 60% in its third weekend. So just massive drops from this movie, with people saying, as I was talking about the last time we spoke of this, it might not even get to $500 million worldwide. The fact that we're now going three underperforming films in a row for Marvel this year, Captain America Brave New World, Thunderbolts, and Fantastic Four, has made a lot of people turn to Avengers Doomsday to speculate and make various predictions about its box office. Some people say that these films were, or at least Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, were still good, and that Avengers Doomsday is going to be this big film that gives it a boost, and that they are successful after that, and you're able to do sequels for, like, say, Fantastic Four. Other people are saying that the Avengers is definitely going to sell just because it's the Avengers name, and Spider-Man Brand New Day, which nobody is denying is going to be a big success, is going to lead into Avengers Doomsday and make everyone excited for that movie, right? I would like to say that, obviously, if you've seen the title of this video, I think Avengers Doomsday is in trouble, and I think the performance of these three films this year really indicates that, and I don't think that Spider-Man Brand New Day is necessarily going to do anything to bring people to Avengers Doomsday. So I want to give my 2 cents into this conversation here and explain exactly why I think we are seeing a flop in the making with Avengers Doomsday. Now, when I say flop, obviously a flop is always either relative to its budget, how much it's going to lose, if that, and of course relative to the studio's expectations. How much did they want the film to get? Is it an underperformance? Even if it did make some of its money back, they're just disappointed with how it performed. But when I say that Avengers Doomsday is probably going to flop, I of course mean relative to its budget and expectations. And they are spending a ridiculous amount of money on Avengers Doomsday. But when I say I think Avengers Doomsday is going to flop, I think it's going to make anywhere less than $1 billion. An Avengers movie making anywhere less than $1 billion would be considered a massive disappointment and failure. But let's break it down now, what I think and why I think that we are seeing a disaster in the making of Avengers Doomsday, and why it is ridiculous to assume that it is going to fix anything, and why I think that it's even possible that this movie is just going to nuke whatever goodwill the MCU might have had left. So, going into Avengers Doomsday, people say that it is going to definitely be a big movie because it has the Avengers on the title, and characters where it's a big brand name still sell when it comes to superhero movies, right? Well, you say it's the Avengers, but is it really? The Avengers are Thor, Captain America, Black Widow, Iron Man, and whatnot coming together in that first 2012 movie. This movie is not that. Avengers Doomsday is not comprised of the Avengers we know. It is comprised of all of the flop characters that we have been getting up to this point. It's comprised of the Thunderbolts, aka the New Avengers, the lowest grossing superhero movie of the year, in a year of many underperformances. It's going to be Sam Wilson's team of Avengers, Sam Wilson, who was in the most panned superhero film of the year. It's going to be him, his sidekick, Shuri Black Panther, who is not T'Challa, so we don't have a Black Panther in this movie. Namor, if anyone cares about the MCU's version of that character. Shang-Chi, which Marvel was never confident enough to give a sequel to. None of these characters have been able to get sequels. And it's gonna be the Fantastic Four, Pedro Pascal and co., who were not able to sell themselves to casual audiences with this movie. And obviously there's other characters who are going to appear in the film, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But going into this film, it's comprised of a ton of characters coming together that haven't worked on screen. And a lot of people are trying to defend this and say, well, the Avengers characters like Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America weren't that popular before they got the Avengers movie, right? And then they increased their popularity. Yes, the Avengers movie did increase their popularity, but Thor, Captain America and Iron Man were far more successful characters when they first released in Phase 1 compared to these movies that are releasing today. Just look at the numbers adjusted for inflation. Iron Man made almost $600 million in 2008. Adjusted for inflation is almost $900 million in today's money. So you see, Iron Man was actually a far more successful character, making almost $1 billion in today's money in 2008. So that was already a very successful character with audiences, leading into the Avengers, which, by the way, the Avengers would have made in the $2 billion range in today's money. Meanwhile, a character like Thor got $450 million at the box office, which would be $644 million approximately in today's money. So that would still be far more than any superhero movie released today. And then we have Captain America, the First Avenger in 2011, which was on the low end for these films, but even that was over $500 million in today's money. So all of these characters were actually doing better than the characters that we're seeing now, especially Iron Man, which was no doubt the breakout hit character. And Thor and Captain America, the First Avenger, were definitely more middling comparison. They weren't as breakout as Iron Man, but you did have one breakout character, and this was an upward trajectory. These were B-list characters that no one had heard of that built up to a big film. But now, these kinds of box office results that we are seeing from Marvel today, where their new characters are lucky to even hit 500 million, and they can't even do that, that is on the downward slope. You know, they were winning over the casual audiences and increasing their revenue at the time, but now they have lost the casual audience, and they don't know how to get them back. So to me, it is ridiculous to look at any of these characters, a million characters from these franchises, and do an Infinity War level event and expect it to be marketed to people based on these characters interacting that they've proven that they don't care about. And you have to remember that Avengers 2012 was highly marketed on the fact that this had never been done before. We had never done a superhero team-up movie from characters that already had their own established franchises. You can't replicate that. And you also have to remember that the Avengers movie 2012, that movie in and of itself was lightning in a bottle. That was like, they would have never thought that that could have worked. That just captured the zeitgeist at that time. I don't think that lightning is going to strike again with this, but this feels like a more of an Infinity War event where you just grab all these characters from the Marvel Universe that aren't necessarily Avengers. But when we went into Infinity War, there had then been so many years of successful films and successful characters that almost made $1 billion in their own right that it was exciting to think of something like Thor's going to interact with the Guardians of the Galaxy or stuff like that. There is no excitement going in with this. There's no excitement of Yelena Belova is going to interact with Reed Richards or anything. These characters are not well established enough, and remember, you had years establishing these characters and winning audience over. In each phase, now you have 1 year where they're basically taking the 3 movies that came out this year as their lead-in, their emergency lead-in to Avengers Doomsday, and expecting audiences who are already disinterested in them to be interested in them interacting in this movie. It'll be interesting to see how much screen time any of these characters get, because they seem like they were really betting on these movies being successful somewhat, but they just weren't. So there is no appeal from these Avengers characters coming into this movie. And just because you call it the Avengers doesn't mean that it is or what people are going to recognize. Look at Captain America, Brave New World. It had Captain America's name on it, but it wasn't a Chris Evans movie, and they really fumbled the handling of Sam Wilson's Captain America. So, and it was not based on the comics at all, and it had a completely different cast. So just because you take a namesake doesn't mean that it's going to work. It's like if you did Spider-Man and it wasn't Peter Parker, it's still a lot harder to get people on board with it. If you did a Batman who wasn't Bruce Wayne, it would be hard to get on board with it. The Avengers are not the Avengers, and they have almost no characters confirmed from the old universe that we loved, so there's no reason to think that people are going to come to this movie for any of these characters. These aren't the Avengers to them. But obviously there are other characters that are going to appear in this film. But let's talk about now, like, what is the marketability of these characters? We've got the Fox X-Men coming in. But are the Fox X-Men that much a draw, especially interacting with mostly these characters? Fox X-Men was successful relative to the time period that it came out in. They were more experimental for the superhero genre and what it would become in the 2010s and how successful it would be. But the Fox X-Men were never as successful as the Avengers. They got one movie that finally got to the $700 million mark, but really the Fox X-Men universe was mostly successful with the character of Wolverine, who they've already played their hand with the Deadpool and Wolverine movie. I'm not sure how much James Marsden's Cyclops or Rebecca Romijn's Mystique are going to be a draw in this movie, especially because there's not really an intrigue for them interacting with these other characters. Like, there's intrigue in having 3 generations of Spider-Man interact with each other because you can think of what that would be like, but I have no imagination whatsoever about what it would be like to have the Fox X-Men interacting with the new Avengers or the Pedro Pascal-led Fantastic Four. It just doesn't sound appealing to me, and they already keep playing their hand with the Fox universe. They already had Patrick Stewart return as Professor X in MOM, and they just killed him off, just like that. They've already played their hand with the Fox X-Men so many times, I don't really understand why they keep doing it over and over again, but I'm not sure that the Fox X-Men, apart from Deadpool and Wolverine, who we'll get to, are going to be that much of a draw in this movie. And if this movie does not turn out, then that is actually going to kneecap their attempts to do a new X-Men movie in the future, because you already keep bringing back the corpses of an old universe back and making it so people don't miss these characters, because you keep going back to this. You had a perfect slate laid out to you to do a new Wolverine and a new X-Men that we hadn't seen these characters in many, many years, and people could give it a fresh new start, but now you're ruining that because you have to bring these characters back from the dead and milk them to death. But let's talk about the Avengers characters that is going to appear in this film. You say, well, Tony Stark is coming back in the movie, so shouldn't that bring everyone back since that is the most popular character? There are many problems to this. There are many, many problems. First of all, Robert Downey Jr. is not being billed as of yet as returning as Tony Stark, the character that people liked him as. He is being billed as playing a completely different character, Doctor Doom. And that casting has been universally rejected by pretty much everyone. I gotta say, it is very difficult to get fans to agree on stuff. I even imagine that there might be some people disagreeing with me on the premise that this movie will bomb, but on the notion of Robert Downey Jr. is going to play an iconic villain that people have been waiting for years to be done right, as just a ploy to get Robert Downey Jr. back in the MCU, everyone saw it for what it was in the beginning, a term of desperation to just get this actor back that his character was killed off, just get him back in the role, just do anything. Everyone sees right through all of the advertising behind this and saying, well, he just really wanted to play this character and whatnot. So that in and of itself does not seem like a draw. And I gotta say, that post-credit scene of Doctor Doom in Fantastic Four got zero fanfare. Zero. No one seems to like this idea. He's not playing the old character he used to play. It's like this is Avengers in name only, as we've heard so far. But, of course, we've got some other characters coming in. We do know we have Chris Hemsworth Thor coming in. That might do something, but remember, he was damaged after his treatment in Avengers Endgame and Thor Love and Thunder as just a joke. And so I'm not sure how much of a sell this is going to be. It's a bunch of characters that no one cares about, past characters that I think people might have moved on from largely now, Chris Hemsworth Thor, a damaged character, and Robert Downey Jr. playing a completely different character. It sounds like a thrown together hodgepodge of just a bunch of characters that mostly no one cares about, and there is no intrigue to this. I see no intrigue in these characters coming together or working together. I don't understand what this Robert Downey Jr. Doctor Doom is even going to be, so I don't think any of that is exactly a sell. Maybe Robert Downey Jr. coming back will get some more people curious, but it seems to be more of a turnoff because it is such an obvious, desperate move. It doesn't seem to actually be exciting anyone. But of course, Avengers Doomsday hasn't even finished announcing its cast yet, and it hasn't even finished filming. So let's get to that, and let's talk about the story and the talent involved with this, and why I also think that is going to be a detriment. Could they bring on more characters in this film to try to punch it up? Well, I guess. rumor is that Deadpool and Wolverine will appear in these films in some capacity, and since they were a part of a billion-dollar film, that would be more of a sell than any of these other characters. However, I gotta say, first of all, Deadpool and Wolverine is not being looked back on fondly by the fan bases I'm seeing, but like I was saying, it's just gonna be more and more of a hodgepodge. Like, there was intrigue in having Wolverine and Deadpool finally do a team-up movie together, but what is the intrigue of them interacting with all of these other characters that no one cares about? Once again, it just seems like a mess, like dumping a bunch of things together just to hope that something is a draw for people, rather than it making any sense. Infinity War was carefully built up to by different films and weaving stories in and out and making it so it would be interesting that the characters were all connected by the Infinity Stones and coming together. What does this really have? I know that there's going to be even more characters announced, like Sylvie from Loki leaked that she's going to be a part of this. I don't know that this is really a good idea, dumping all of these characters together and just hoping that maybe a few get people to go see the film, which seems like a completely incohesive idea. But I gotta say, their biggest player, because some people are saying that Brand New Day will reinvigorate people and bring them to this movie. Rumor is Tom Holland's Spider-Man is not going to be in the Avengers films, and that they could not work out a deal with Sony. And he's been talking like that. He's been talking about like he plans to retire after he's done with Brand New Day. And to me, that would make sense, because I don't know why Sony would want Spider-Man to continue to appear in these movies, because when they loaned their ownership of Spider-Man to the MCU was going so strong, and their current universe with Spider-Man wasn't doing so great, so it made sense for them to make a deal and make some joint profit out of it. But now with the MCU doing so badly, it makes sense for Sony to do what they've always said they wanted to do, apparently, and bring Spider-Man back over to them so he can leave the sinking ship that is the MCU. So you don't have your biggest character, Spider-Man, allegedly going to appear in this film, and you just have a hodgepodge of other characters. I just don't see how it works out. And there's been more rumors, because they just keep laying things onto this film, that maybe Tony Stark, Iron Man, will come back from the dead and fight Doctor Doom somehow, so you can get Robert Downey Jr. to fight Doctor Doom. I think that they will pull out all the stops after seeing that these characters weren't successful to try to get people back on board, but it just sounds like a thrown together hodgepodge to me. So now is a good time to talk about what is going on with the making of this film and why I think it is going to be such a disaster. Now, we know for years now, and this dates back to Iron Man 2008, that there were films that were very successful and that Marvel was even built on that went forward without finished scripts and managed to come through in the end. But I have never seen or heard from a movie that sounds more thrown together and unorganized as Avengers Doomsday, when as the film was starting to film, we heard actors say week after week that they still hadn't seen a script yet. And as the months went by, we still hear from reports from the filming that they are still writing the script. They are bringing on Michael Waldron, who wrote Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, probably the film that turned the tide of the MCU and made it all go downhill. Michael Waldron is now on set helping to write the script that they haven't finished to figure out what they're going to do. He has done terrible work in the past. He cannot write world building to save his life. He is responsible for the assassination of Scarlet Witch. That would tell me just what a disaster this film is going to be from a writing scale. Once again, it just seems like something thrown together last minute out of desperation to do anything to turn casual audiences' heads back to this movie. It seems that everyone agrees, in fact, that Avengers Doomsday sounds like an unmitigated disaster, something that is just going to be thrown together last second with the scraps of everything that they have done up to this point for the last 6 years of tearing down their universe, in a film that they are going to desperately pull out any stop to just get people into theater just to watch it, even though I think Avengers Doomsday sounds like the kind of movie that could open to a 20%er on Rotten Tomatoes and just be panned for the disaster that it is. And I'm not sure if their mode of key jangling is even what audiences want to see from it. In addition to all of that, you've got the Russo brothers working on the film, who have not done a successful film since Avengers Endgame. All of their films have been panned, and they've been accused of checking out of filmmaking and not really caring anymore. And remember, they didn't do all the right things with Avengers Endgame either. It just sounds like a massive recipe for absolute disaster, and maybe destroying the last bit of goodwill that the MCU brand even has, rather than bringing new people to see these characters after all of this. I honestly can't believe that they're even going forward with the project after all of this. It just seems like the dumbest idea that they're stuck with now. Regardless, maybe if they hadn't done this idea, they could have rebooted quietly and maybe gotten more people on board there, but this just seems like something that's gonna damage the Avengers brand forever, perhaps, because it just sounds like such an obvious disaster so far out from it. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if they throw in Deadpool and Wolverine and some other characters, it'll bring people on board. We have to see, but I think that people have really jumped off of this wild train that is the MCU, and I don't see how 3 flops leading into this film are going to guarantee its success in any way, shape, or form, or a concept that most people have made it clear that they've rejected. But that's all I got for you guys today. What do you think? Do you think that the Avengers brand is enough to carry this film? What do you think is going to happen with Secret Wars? Or if there's any hope for the Marvel heroes after that? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you, patrons and members, as always, for supporting me. If you want to become a member or a patron, you can consider becoming one. Links are in the description. And I will see you guys next time.